Hello, everybody, and good Monday morning. I am Angie Callen, and this is No More Mondays, the best hour of your start to the work week. This is the podcast where we believe you can have an amazing career or business and a thriving life on your terms. And so I bring you guests who are walking that walk and talking that talk, doing meaningful work in the world and sharing their knowledge on how you can navigate life with more joy, more impact, and maybe even a little saxophone on the side. Yeah, you heard that right, and you may just hear it later. Today's guest is Phil Mershon, author of Unforgettable, founder of Unforgettable Experiences, and the guy who might just open a keynote speech with a little Kenny G-style riff on a soprano sax. Phil has spent years designing events that people remember for even more years. But the secret sauce, it's not just about lighting and lanyards, y'all. It's about the people. You know I love talking about people. And whether Phil is curating a conference for 5,000 of them or building a moment that moves somebody to tears, he understands what it takes to be memorable. And today we're going to talk about how you can show up more powerfully in your life, in your work, and in your leadership. It's all about the art and science of being unforgettable and making unforgettable connections with one human I am very, very grateful to be connected to. Phil, welcome to No More Mondays.
With that setup, man, the standard is high. I'm so glad to be on your show, Angie. It was great to meet you. You were unforgettable when we met.
Oh, well, now I feel like we can't have this conversation because I'm going to talk all about how to be unforgettable.
Well,
I appreciate that so much. And sometimes, many of you have heard about The Thing because we've had many guests where the connection happened. And Phil is, no offense to the ones who've come before, one of the ones that will be with me forever. You're stuck with me.
Oh, okay.
And it really is, events can give you so many memories, but really, again, it comes down to the people. And so I'm so glad we're here, and thanks for joining.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be here.
So I want to go in the Wayback Machine for a second. Because there's some formative years where you gained a little perspective because of fourth grade and some barbecue Pringles. So can you tell us what that memorable moment for you taught you about influence and bold ideas?
So all of us sat at those tables at lunch in grade school and maybe junior high. And this was just like any ordinary lunch, except this day I brought Pringles and Kevin brought barbecued potato chips. And I had this idea. What if we put them together and ate them at the same time? So we tried it and said, that's pretty good. We told our friends, try it. They all liked it. And I said, Pringles needs to do this. Now, this was before Pringles had anything other than the original chip.
There was only the red can at this point.
The red can. It was back in the 70s, probably early to mid 70s. Yeah, probably mid 70s. And so I loved the idea so much that I went home and I created a petition, and I went to school and got as many kids to sign it. I asked my fellow students, take it to your neighborhoods, your parents, anywhere they could. I literally canvassed my neighborhood up and down and asked people to sign it. I had hundreds of signatures, and I found an address for Pringles, and I put them all in a folder and I mailed them off, and I still haven't heard.
And to this day, well, it's a good thing that was maybe pre-digital. Yes, there it is.
Out with it, but I didn't get any credit, even though it was
or royalties. But we're not going to talk about that.
I just wanted to be a taste tester for them,
It's so fun. At fourth grade, that's what seemed important, right?
Absolutely.
So all these years later, I guess, what did that spark for you?
It tells me something about myself. And the reason it's on my LinkedIn page is because I like combining familiar things and making something that is seemingly new or a new approach. And so barbecue potato or Pringles isn't new today, but I still do those kinds of things. Like you said, I play saxophone at the start of a keynote. There's very few people that do anything like that when they're giving a keynote. There are people who play music because they're, they have a skill, or they're jugglers or whatever, but I'm bringing myself into a place that's unexpected. Therefore, it becomes memorable.
Yeah. The unexpected piece, I think, is one aspect of memorable because here's the thing. It's a little bit, this is a little bit of a personal branding talk. We're just not going to call it that. But Phil will always be that guy who played the saxophone at the beginning of his keynote, right? For me, he's Phil, but also if somebody's like, oh, well, wait, who's Phil? I'm going to be like the guy that plays the saxophone at the beginning of his keynote, or the guy who will create a song for you if you give him 3 emotions, right? Or those kids you went to, I bet you this has happened. And if anybody out there listening has known Phil since 4th grade, please confirm it for us. Somebody, the year those barbecue Pringles hit the shelf, said, hey, do you remember those 2 kids in 4th grade who sat around the lunch table and they dipped their Pringles in barbecue sauce? They might not remember Phil or Kevin, but the moment and the human behind it was memorable. And so I love this idea of like the surprise element, right? And that's why the music comes in.
Absolutely. And let's get the record straight. We combined a Pringles chip and a barbecue chip together to make.
Oh, wait, that's chip. So much even better than barbecue sauce.
Right? Right? Even better.
Man. The idea was there before the sour cream and onion, y'all.
It was. Yeah, absolutely.
It was. And so, you really focus on the event, the like almost like experience in the literal sense, but so much of that rolls down, trickles down into us as individuals. And also these events are made to be memorable at that individual level. Where did your interest in that experience and an event component of experience come from?
It's interesting because it's been evolving for a long time. Even when I was about 7 years old, I remember the very first time that we had come home from church and I got inspired and told my brother and sister, bring out all the stuffed animals, sit on the couch. And I was the preacher. So that was like the first event that I created. But I think watching events over time and the power that they had on me, I was a student of it for a really long time and never would have even expected that I would be a creator of them because I was very shy, very introverted. When I took public speaking in college, I failed the persuasive talk and was like, I'm never getting on a stage after this class is done. And yet 5 years later, I was on a stage in front of 5,000 people. And that's a whole different topic. So, but I think my first job out of college, I was in a workshop where they taught brainstorming. And that's when I started realizing, okay, here's a guy who is empowering people to unleash their ideas. And that caught my attention. So that's like one aspect. It was an experience where something was unlocked. I think as I was, I got trained as a musician, and there's certain musical experiences that I've had both as a performer and as someone in the audience that I still remember to this day because it made an emotional impact. They told a story that brought me in, right? I'm choked up thinking about it. And you don't even know the stories.
Yeah. But it made such an impression on you.
Yeah. And so that's what fascinated me. There was one in particular where I went eventually and talked to the artistic director to understand, because I began calling that time standing still, where you create these experiences that stand out from many other experiences. And that does happen one-on-one. And I'll come back to that in a minute, but it often happens in a group setting because, and I think why events do this differently than our day-to-day is it's taking us out of the day-to-day. We're away from the normal trappings. We are more open to new ideas, new connections, and new experiences. And so, I went and talked to this guy and I said, how did you make that happen? And his answer surprised me because I was looking for, okay, what's the formula that I can use to apply to other events? And he said, I didn't. All I did was told a great story. And he said, if you would have come back to that show 5 times in a row, there might have been a different aspect of the event that connected with you because we told the story similar, but different. But what you're bringing into it is why that stood out. And I'll tell you the quick story of it is musical called Sweet Charity, which is a story about a
Yeah.
businessman who, falls in love with a showgirl. I think it's in New York City,
Mhm.
and they're having this weird, interesting relationship. And overall, it's a really funny musical. It's got a light spirit to it, but at the end, it becomes serious. And he's on stage saying to himself, I'm not worthy of her love, which is a juxtaposition of like, he's the businessman and she's the one who's, kind of in this ill repute, profession. And yet he's saying she's more worthy than I am. Am I worthy of her love? He's asking like these really profound questions that every man has asked himself. And, I've only seen the musical once. I've never even watched the movie version, but that scene stood out to me so much that it makes me choke up today. And so I said, that's what I want to do at events. I
Yeah.
want to create those moments where people have an aha and they say, I can't be different.
Yeah.
And I think we
Yeah.
can do that one-on-one too, in the way that we show up. I had it happen this week. And I had it happen with another lady. This doesn't happen very often when I get on a Zoom call like this, where the person on the other side is so present when they show up that it catches me off guard. Like they were
Well,
ready.
because we are never in that position ever. We're so distracted.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's that
like,
easy to be memorable in a way.
yeah, and they're dressed for the moment. They just show up and they're so ready to have the conversation and they stay there. It's like, wow, I wasn't ready for that. And it
Yeah.
calls me to step up. And I can tell you those two people right now. I won't, but and I've had thousands of Zoom calls. None of the others stand out like that.
Yeah. And I think something that you said something that I think is a really good point. And that is that there is this idea that there's a
Mm.
formula to the perfect event, a formula to the perfect ecosystem for connection. Ultimately, I mean, maybe there's a formula, but it involves things that you can't solve for. This idea of like intentionality, authenticity, maybe even considering it like this happy accident that you created the right space for connection and uniqueness and experience and memorability to happen. And in a way, I think you have a really good chance of that occurring if you try less hard.
Yeah, I think you can create the conditions for serendipity, if you want to say that, but you can't force it to happen.
Yeah.
And so, if you allow a space that people feel, secure, safe, to be
Mhm.
who they are, if you help people get into the right room where they're with the people that they need to connect with, then you've increased that. If you remove anything else that can get in the way, like, a bad experience with food or lights or sound or the temperature and all those things that can distract people, then it becomes increasingly likely that it will happen.
Mm.
And so I think you can do that with others, but like you said, one-on-one, it's like, just be who you are, show
Yeah.
up and be confident in who you are. And you can always find a way to connect with people if you're curious.
There's a connection there in my mind of all of don't put things in the way.
Yes.
Like at an event, don't put a freezing cold room where I have to get up and leave 10 times because I have to walk around in the way of me connecting to other people or to the event content. Just like don't put distraction in the way of a one-on-one meeting
Mm.
because as Phil said, in thousands of Zooms, he will forever remember the one person who didn't do that. And so that's where I think some of these missteps come into play where when I say try less hard, I mean that it's like, it's not rocket science here to just not overthink the situation. But again, create that authentic space for connection. So what are some of like the missteps that you see we do? So we've talked about this idea of like a cold room, bad food. If people are not fed well, so it's funny when we talk about events, all the event planning things are really in my mind secondary, but to support the ecosystem. So, like at a one-on-one level, what are some things we should be thinking about to make sure we don't put in the way of connection or that we don't disrupt what could otherwise be a very authentic experience?
I mean, this is communication 101,
Yeah.
but pause, keep your thoughts quiet and stay curious in what the other person's saying, and don't like speed ahead with what am I going to say next, but listen to what they're saying. Like that's basic communication, but it's hard to do, especially if you're caffeinated.
Well, and also just we live in a society that uh listens to respond. We generally do not listen to hear. And there is a giant difference between the two. And I tell my coach clients all the time, if you are the person you get on a sales call with a potential client, if you are the person that gives them space to talk about their challenges and you hear them and can confirm and summarize what you've heard back to them, you have made yourself infinitely invaluable because we all want to be heard. We often just don't get that. Communications 101.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other part of that is if you are pursuing with curiosity and, openness to what they have to say, then you're going to learn something. You may even have an aha yourself, but if you're constantly trying to get your point across, then you're going to miss out on that. You're going to miss
Yeah.
who that person is.
Our friend Justin Shank, hey Justin out there, said something at an event I was at with him a few weeks ago, a month or two ago. I don't know. Time has no boundaries anymore. But he said, "Be more interested than interesting." And I think that is a great way to stop and go, wait, am I trying to be interesting and talk about myself too much? Or am I being curious and interested in the other person? And guess what? In doing that, you know what happens? You become interesting because you're compelling and memorable and connecting. It's exactly your point, Phil.
Absolutely. And I think another thing that gets in our way is we create distractions. So, at an event, if somebody's speaking on stage, then all of a sudden you see a door open and light comes in the room. Or like I was at Hamilton and literally someone was in the balcony. They pulled out their phone and they took a flash photo. It took my mind away for 5 to 10 minutes, wondering if someone was going to come out and pull that person out of the out of the auditorium. Um, if we do that in our conversations where we have our phones on, we don't let others in the house or in our office know that we're going to be on a call right now, and those distractions come in, your brain gets pulled away. You're not able to listen to the other person. So I think distractions happen at events. They happen in our one-to-one relationships. You can tell, like, I don't know if you've ever been in these conversations where you're with somebody and they're constantly looking around the room at who else is there, or they're having a networking conversation with you, and then they realize the person they really wanted to talk to was there and they didn't even apologize. They just leave and make you feel like you're trash, you're no one.
Or they stand there and they go,
yeah, exactly.
I just looked sideways 3 times, by the way, for those of you listening in podcast land, but you can clearly tell you are not the priority or the majority of the focus. Don't be that guy.
I get ADHD because I have it, but that means you got to work harder. Work harder to listen to that person. Maybe you need to put yourself with your back to the room so that you can look at that person instead of being against the wall where you can see all those things.
Yeah.
My father-in-law was a cop, a detective. And so he did put his back, but that's because he wanted to make sure nothing nefarious was.
He was scanning the room, and that's what he was present to be doing.
he needed to because he wanted other people to feel safe. But he could do it in a way that he could still be present to the person because he'd been practicing that for 30 years or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But you and I can't do that. Like our brains can't divide like that.
There's a sense of like, I think self-awareness, situational awareness, social awareness that you need to build. And then you bring the communication skills so that you give yourself your best chances of success. And so this has been a little bit of like the not what to do. Now let's talk about what we can intentionally do, to maybe build a little bit of more of that memorable energy. You know, we're talking about this word unforgettable, which sounds super bold, super big to somebody out there who's maybe more introverted. But how does somebody of any kind of personality type start to identify and build that maybe memorable persona or memorable energy?
Well, I think one part is knowing who you are, because I think if you're going to be memorable if you're being yourself. We've talked about being authentic, but if you recognize things about yourself that make you special and you enjoy doing, don't be afraid of those things. Like for the longest time, I felt embarrassed about being a saxophonist. And,
Mm.
but it's only been recently that I've started doing that intentionally when I go speak or when I'm on a podcast. I offer it every time I'm on a podcast now, because a couple years ago, someone said, Phil, that should be your signature sign off. And that word stuck with me. It's like, absolutely. I'm going to
Talk about
start
an
doing
aha
that.
moment.
Yeah, that was a wake up. It's like, well, yeah, because I did it for them. And they're like, that was so brilliant. You should be doing that all the time. And so,
Mm.
what is that thing about you? Do you know what that thing about you is that's your signature sign off that makes you different from everybody else? Like in a sea of penguins, how can you be that one penguin that everyone notices? And that's the one thing that makes you unique, or it could be more than one thing. So that's a way to be memorable, is being that person. But I think also
Mhm.
finding those things that you can do that are a combination of different skills that people are going to notice. If you're preparing for a place, how are you going to dress? Are you going to dress in a way that is you, or are you going to dress to blend in? And I'm not saying go flamboyant, but be confident and comfortable in who you are. People are going to notice that. I talk about unforgettable being memorable, meaningful, and momentous. And so the memorable includes the unexpected, it includes the combination of things that you're going to do, and it also includes this surprise. Like, are you
Mm.
thinking about this surprise and delight moments? Those looking for opportunities to serve, looking for opportunities to do something that the person is not looking for. They're going to remember that. Like if you notice a need that they have, you're self-aware enough to be more aware of what the other person is
Mm.
looking for and needing, and how can I serve them. They're gonna realize, oh, they understand me, they saw a need, and they're gonna say, Phil's the one who helped me have that aha moment. He was so willing to sit with me. Just yesterday I was on a call, and the guy had a reason that he wanted to be on the call. He wanted to understand some things, and I gave him some tips. Then he said, Phil, I'm here to serve you. How can I help you? And he meant it. And this is like a
Mm.
multi-millionaire person who's like leader in his industry. And he spent like 30 minutes with me, and I walked away with a plan that didn't go into the call expecting. And it was exactly what I needed on the day that I needed it. And he delivered it. And I won't forget him for that,
Yeah.
because he was willing to ask the question, and then he was willing to give the answer with no strings attached. Like if you give a gift to someone that's what they need and not what you want to give them,
Yep.
they will remember that. That's special because it's customized. And that was a gift of time, gift of knowledge. You can actually give a gift of an object, but don't just give something that is expected. Give something that's for them.
Yeah. And don't give to get. That's a perfect example of being interested instead of interesting, because that person could easily just be interesting, and look how he flipped the script. So I want to go back real quick. You said unforgettable is about being memorable, about being, what was it? The second one. And it was memorable,
Meaningful.
momentous, but there was something in the middle.
Yeah,
Meaningful. That was it.
meaningful. Yeah. So by
Gotta write
meaningful,
this stuff down, y'all.
meaningful at an event means you understand who your audience is, you know what they're
Mm.
looking for, you know what their needs are, you've kind of understood their emotional journey. Where are they starting when they arrive? What are they feeling? What are they thinking about? How are they going to experience what they're coming into? And then how is it going to go through the whole experience? What are the places that they're going to get tripped up? Where are they going to lose energy? Trying to think about all those things. And then also considering what is the role of the the five senses in their experience, and how does that make it meaningful to them? And that could also be considered in the memory, because things like your olfactory sense is very memory driven. But I had to figure out where to put it in this in this framework, and meaning is a place where it increases the likelihood of meaning. So if you know the research, you know that if you only use one sense, the likelihood that someone's going to remember it is very low. And we tend to do sight and sound are the two first ones we use, especially in conferences and even in our engagement with people. That's how we approach these things. But then if you add in olfactory, you add in touch, and you add in taste, and now all of a sudden I've had this experience, let's say, of a scrumptious meal that's been put together with intentional conversation. The aromas of the room have a unique smell. The person has helped me to have a great experience from start to finish. There's like this emotional component, sixth sense, as far as that goes. Now all of a sudden, it's not just a dinner; it's an experience.
It's an experience.
And so that's where it's meaningful. Like if the host has understood who I am in a small party, and they help me feel connected, they help me feel safe. They know what I like. They know that I've got food allergies. They know that I'm, sober, these kinds of things. And so they have options, and they've taken the time to customize the meal and the experience for each person in the room. They feel seen, and we collectively feel seen, and we feel like we want to enter into this experience with those that we came with, whether we knew them or not. And I think you can do that individually. You've done your research. We're in a podcast, and I'm guilty of this, and I'm sure you are too. Have you done your research before you show up in the conversation to know what questions you should be asking, to know what you've been up to recently, so that you can ask better questions, so that you can, build on what they've been doing, as opposed to having start from scratch?
Don't be tone deaf, people. Don't be tone deaf. There's more to it than that. I think there's at the very fundamental, it's being thoughtful and being kind. I attest that society needs a lot more of both of those things right now. But I really like the idea of this five senses thing, because think about it. How often have you ever walked into somewhere and thought, oh my gosh, this place smells like cookies? Or, oh my gosh, this smells like my mom's house, right? Our memories, one, at an individual level, we have different senses that are stronger. And so we attach to memories in kind of different ways. And then if you can hit on multiple of them, you make the whole entire thing stronger and stickier. And that's a really cool way to think about, like, okay, well, I guess what kind of smell am I going to pump into my office? No, just kidding.
Yeah. Well, and the reverse is true as well. So I bet you have these scents or these smells that drive you back to negative experiences. So if I smell sulfur, to this day, it'll take me back to 1987. I was in Kenya, and I was living in this community that was right next to a sugar plantation where they use sulfur in the refining process. And depending on the day, the winds could blow that sulfur odor over the community. And, in general, you know what it is. But this particular day, I was sick to my stomach, and they brought me bananas to eat, and I'm smelling the sulfur. So to this day, if I smell sulfur and I'm eating bananas, I get sick to my stomach.
I shouldn't laugh at that. But
right?
So we should say hi to my mom right now, because my mom is a big Phil fan. And also she listens to every episode of No More Mondays. And she, as soon as you said the word sulfur bringing about memories, I know she started laughing, because guess what memory sulfur brings back for me? My childhood home, because we grew up in the country in Western Pennsylvania with a well, and my friends would come over from high school and be like, oh my gosh, it smells like eggs. And my mom still has stories about that to this day. So now, though, you can reassociate is actually an interesting thing, though, because now we have hot springs where I live, and sulfur is one of the elements really prevalent in hot springs. And so now I associate that smell with hot springs instead of egg water.
Yeah.
I won't give you a banana if you ever come to visit and go in the hot springs, Phil.
Well, and it probably won't do that to me in as hot springs, because I do have memories of going those kind of places. But yeah, I think if you can create a unique smell at an event that is distinctive, So it's not like anything people have smelled before. And it's usually, it's going to be a combination of things. Like there's no unique smell on the planet.
Yeah, it's
But
not like go light your sugar cookie candle. Like that's not, yeah, don't go to Yankee, guys. Probably barking up the wrong tree.
but there are companies out there that teach you how to combine smells into something that is
So
unique. And if
interesting.
your event or your house has a distinctive smell, people will remember it. Like I remember what my grandma's kitchen smelled like. I can't describe it to you, but if I smelled something like it, I'd be like, oh, I'm there. And like you said, with
Instant,
bread or,
instant.
certain kind of foods, like I'm drawn back to those experiences, and it's like really comforting or not comforting if that's someone you didn't like.
So here's what I think is interesting. So far, we've talked about experiences and creating an environment of personal connection at any scale. This can happen whether you're in a giant room or one to one through basic communication skills and foundational five sensory like touch points. Like this isn't really that complicated, but we put things in the way that make it complicated. And one of the things I want to get your thoughts on is, you mentioned the aha moment of bringing music in so that that helped you stand out. I am the I'm going to have flannel on if everybody else has a suit on. That's part of me because of me being earthy crunchy. But I'm curious, let's say somebody out there is sitting there going, okay, I would love to be more memorable, but I don't have a saxophone. I don't have mountain adventures, a mountain bike, and flannel. I'm not I don't feel charismatic or creative. What can those people do? What are some small things they could do to maybe start finding the things that make them stand out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of what makes us unique are our stories. So think through your life and what are some of those peak stories and events, and become a storyteller. Learn how to tell your story and look at the common threads. This is an exercise I did with a career counselor a couple of different times, but if you can think of like 20 peak experiences in your life and then find the ones that stand out the most, like 5 or 7, and just write about them for, 5 minutes and come up with a page, and then look at the commonalities of those stories, and you're going to start to see some threads, and lean into
Mhm.
those threads in terms of who you are, because those are going to tell you a story about who you are, the things that get you excited. Those, and by peak moments, what I mean is places where you feel like, if I could do this all the time, my life would be so great, because they get you excited. You love telling those stories. And I'll bet every one of you listening has stories that you've told numerous times, and you have no problem telling those stories. In fact, your face lights up. You probably are thinking
Mhm.
about one right now. I cried before I told you this story about Sweet Charity because I was thinking about it. Now, that wasn't a peak experience, but for me, being myself, but it was a peak experience that I'll never forget. So, what were those stories? What's similar to them? And that can start to inform you. How do I show up? It could be the way you tell stories. I have no problem telling dad jokes, even though my kids groan every time or they run, because sometimes they're funny, but it's just, I can't help telling puns. I've done it all my life. And, I don't have any shame over telling bad jokes that are dad jokes.
Hey, guess what, Phil? Amen. Because I'm a middle-aged woman and I love a good dad joke. So,
Those mom
uh,
jokes, I don't know if you knew, they rival dad jokes. Like mom jokes are a thing too.
that's a whole rabbit hole. I think the point here though is introspection is a very powerful thing. And if you feel like you don't have that obvious hook that is a saxophone, or adventure or whatever it is, look inward and reconnect with the stories that you do have, because we're really good at diminishing those stories and keeping them small and feeling like they don't have value, but they do, and they become the thread that can become the charisma that you don't feel like you naturally have. And so now here's where I want to take that. Let's say if somebody out there says, okay, I know what my special sauce is. I know the thing, but I want to start creating maybe mini experiences. Maybe it's a small business owner, coach, solopreneur. They're not going big scale event, but they maybe want to start creating mini experiences or be more intentional about their one-on-one environments so that they can leave a mark. What are some things they can do?
So this is something you do at big events, and you can do it in personal events. Think about 3 moments that really matter. First impression. What do you get? Like 7 seconds to make a first impression. If it's
7 seconds.
one-on-one, you get maybe 7 minutes if it's at an event. Think about how you're going to start. How are you showing up in that first moment? Second one is closing, the last impression when you're leaving the conversation. Are you just slipping away? Are you being intentional about the way that you say goodbye, the way that you wrap it up? Then the third one is that just pick one moment in between. There are multiple peak moments in between a first and last impression at an event and in your conversation. But I would say do something that is disruptive, something that they're not expecting you to do that is going to change the pace of the conversation, change the pace of the event. Like if you're giving a keynote talk, you probably know this, Angie. You shouldn't do the same thing for more than about 7 minutes.
Nope.
You shouldn't stay in the same spot on the stage. You should change your dynamics, maybe introduce a different kind of media, because you want to create some cognitive switching that's going on so that people stay engaged. And you got to do that in conversation too. If you were to allow me to just talk for 20 minutes, which by the way, I've had people do on my podcast before.
Me too. And you're like, okay, well, that's either a Franken edit or one to toss in the can because you just monologued my whole episode.
I have thrown at least one of those in the can, and I won't tell you who it's with till we're offline. But yeah, it's happened. So
Well, and I know, Phil, this is a good time because you were talking about mini experiences, big events. This is your bread and butter and this is your area of expertise. So how do people find you? The book about experiences, right? There's a wealth of wisdom out there from this guy. How does everybody out there find you and learn from it?
Well, when you go on Amazon, look for the elephant because elephants remember everything. And this guy's name is
it's such a perfect cover, by the way.
Look for the book Unforgettable on Amazon. It's there. Right now it's discounted pretty severely, which is painful to me, but good for you. My website is philmershon.com. It's got all my socials on there. I would recommend going and finding me on Facebook and LinkedIn. I'm most active on those 2 platforms. And if you want to email me, phil@philmershon.com would be the best place to go.
Like me, all the places. And if you're watching or listening here on LinkedIn Live, you can just hop right over and follow Phil. I recommend you do because he is somebody who has really great, meaningful content on brand, but at the same time has a lightness about it, and I appreciate that kind of positive spin in feeds and social that can be really, really heavy. So the book is fantastic. I have a copy back there. And I believe it's even signed. It is that special.
It is. There's one more thing I would recommend, by the way. I do have a podcast myself, and you're going to be on there soon, called the Event Innovator Show. So check that out if you're interested in learning more about events from people who host events or have something unique to say about events.
And this might be something I've never said on this podcast. At one point, for a very, very brief moment in time, one of my 13 entrepreneurial side hustles I've had over the years was event planning. So I actually really like these kinds of conversations, like thinking about the human experience in an event. And that's one of the many things that Phil and I have connected over is the fact that we love people and want to create spaces where people can be with other people. And so, whether you are out there leading these kinds of meetings or events, or you're just launching a brand, building your business, remember, people don't connect with the PowerPoint. They remember the people and how those people made them feel. And Phil reminded us that the path to being unforgettable isn't about flashy bells and whistles. It's about intentionality, thoughtful moments, consistent connections. Be memorable, be meaningful, be momentous. And maybe sometimes a little saxophone flair doesn't hurt. So on that note, Phil, I would love one more piece of wisdom for you before we usher everybody out with a little special surprise. But if somebody out there wants to be more intentional about being more memorable and they don't have anything special, what's the number one piece of advice you have for them?
Number one, that's hard to give just one. Really, really go back to discovering your secret sauce. What makes you different? If you're in a room of 10 people, what's that thing that makes you stand out that you can keep leaning into and experimenting with? So experiment, try things that make you uncomfortable. Don't be afraid to fail.
Yep.
But as you lean into that secret sauce, you can make it more and more special and make it that sauce that grandma keeps secret in the family.
Yeah, I really love the idea of get uncomfortable, because it's very possible the thing that is your secret sauce is the thing that you like least about yourself. And if you can embrace it and own it and figure out how to put it in a positive spin for yourself and put it out there. Like Phil said, he hid the saxophone for so many years, and then it came out, and then it made him the thing that is memorable. And so what I want to ask you and challenge all of you to do is, what's the memorable moment you've experienced and stuck with, and what can you learn from it? All right, everybody, I challenge you to do the inner work. See what makes you unforgettable. Be bold. Figure out your feelings. Figure out the common thread. Share it with Phil and I here on LinkedIn or in a message anywhere you want to find us, because we want to know what moves you and makes you memorable. People connect with people. Be one to connect with. I'm Angie Callan, and this has been another amazing and special, memorable episode of No More Mondays. Huge thanks to Phil Mershon for reminding us that unforgettable doesn't mean flashy, it just means the saxophone. I'll see you next week for another episode of No More Mondays podcast.